She was on her knees in the mud, her thin rags soaked through with icy rain, her body trembling so violently her teeth ached. The man standing over her was a nightmare rendered in flesh and shadow, the Dark Alpha, Kalen of the Shadowfen. His warriors, massive and silent, formed a perimeter in the dying woods, their eyes glowing faintly in the dusk. Ilara's pack, the Cinder Pack, had warned her of him, a monster who devoured Omegas, a warlord who tore trespassers apart. She had been running, starving and desperate, and had crossed the unseen line. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the snap of her neck, the tearing of claws. This was it. This was the pain she expected. Instead, a heavy weight settled over her shoulders, impossibly warm, smelling of pine, winter, and a clean masculinity that stunned her. She gasped, her eyes flying open. Kalen, the Dark Alpha, was crouched before her, his massive form shielding her from the wind. He had wrapped his own fur-lined cloak around her shaking body. His face, harsh and scarred in the gloom, was inches from hers. His eyes, the color of a frozen lake, held an intensity that wasn't rage. It was something else. Then he spoke, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, and he shattered her reality with a single word. He whispered her name, Ilara. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. How? How did this monster, this legend of terror, know her name? Ilara was a nobody, the Cinder Pack's curse, a broken Omega whose own wolf had been silent for years. She was the runt, the scapegoat for every failed hunt, every cold winter, every ounce of misery her alpha, Silas, inflicted upon them. To be known by him was impossible. Kalen's gaze swept over her, taking in her matted hair, the gauntness of her cheeks, the raw red skin of her hands. He didn't look disgusted. He looked angry, a deep, quiet rage that seemed to hum in the air around him. He rose to his full, terrifying height, towering over her. "On your feet," he commanded. It wasn't a request. She tried. Her legs, numb from hunger and cold, betrayed her. She stumbled, pitching forward. He caught her easily, his one arm banding around her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. She yelped, a pathetic sound, her hands flying to his chest to steady herself. It was like touching granite, warm and unyielding beneath his leathers. She was enveloped in his scent, in the heavy security of his cloak. It was the first time she had felt safe in her entire life, and it was in the arms of the deadliest alpha on the continent. The irony was so bitter, it almost made her laugh. "Malachi!" Kalen's voice cut through the rain. A warrior, second only to Kalen in size, stepped forward. His face was a mask of cold suspicion, his eyes fixed on Ilara. "Alpha? Take her back to the fortress, put her in the East Tower room, send for the physician." Malachi's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Alpha? The tower? She is a stray, a Cinder Pack scavenger." Kalen's head snapped toward his beta. His voice dropped, becoming the deadly thing of legends. "She has a name, and you will use it. Now." Malachi flinched. He bowed his head, the gesture sharp with resentment. "Yes, Alpha." He motioned to two other warriors. "You heard him. Take Ilara." Kalen didn't release her. Not yet. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "You are not a prisoner, Ilara," he said softly, contradicting the armed escort, the fortress, the very fact of her capture. "You are a guest." A hysterical bubble of laughter, or maybe a sob, rose in her throat. A guest? She, who had eaten scraps from the Cinder Pack's midden heap, was a guest of the Dark Alpha? The irony was so bitter, it almost made her laugh. "Why?" she whispered, the single word all her exhausted mind could form. His thumb brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek. The calloused skin against her own was a shock. "Because," he said, "I have been searching for you for a very long time." He released her then, stepping back. The two warriors moved in, taking her arms. They were not gentle, but they were not brutal. They pulled her along, her bare feet stumbling over the slick rocks and roots. She clutched the heavy cloak around her, the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted off its axis. She looked back once. Kalen hadn't moved. He was a statue of shadow and power, watching her go, his face lost to the deepening night. The fortress was not the dark, jagged ruin of her imagination. It was a massive, imposing structure of stone and timber, but light streamed from its windows, promising warmth. She was half-dragged through a great hall where a massive fire roared. Pack members, men, women, children, stopped and stared as she was brought through. Their faces were not gaunt. Their clothes were not rags. They looked healthy, strong. Their eyes held suspicion, curiosity, but not the desperate, sharp-edged hatred she was used to. She was taken up a winding staircase to a room that made her gasp. It was simple, but it was luxurious. A thick fur rug covered the floor. A fire was already laid in the hearth, just waiting for a spark. And in the center, a bed. A real bed, piled high with quilts and pillows. A moment later, an older woman with kind eyes entered. She wore the scent of herbs and healing. "I am Lyra, the pack physician," she said, her voice gentle. She looked at the warriors. "Out. She's half dead from cold and starvation. She's no threat to anyone." The guards hesitated, but a sharp nod from Malachi, who had followed them up, sent them from the room. Malachi lingered, his arms crossed, his distrust a palpable force. "And you, Beta," Lyra said, not even looking at him. "Unless you plan on helping me bathe her and check for injuries, you can wait outside as well." Malachi's lip curled, but he turned and left, closing the heavy door with a definitive thud. Ilara was left alone with the healer. She clutched the cloak tighter. "Let's get that off you, child," Lyra said softly. "It's soaked, and it's far too large." When the cloak was removed, Ilara felt naked, exposed, despite her rags. Lyra's kind expression faltered as she saw what was underneath. The thinness of Ilara's frame, the jut of her ribs, the map of old and new bruises that painted her skin. When Lyra gently pushed the rags from her shoulders, she saw the scars. Thin, white, and deliberate, marks of punishment, marks of shame. Lyra's breath hitched. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. Ilara couldn't answer. She just shook. "The Alpha, Silas, he did this. Everyone knew. It was her due, for being the pack curse." Lyra's face hardened. She said nothing more, just guided Ilara to a steaming tub of water that sat behind a screen. The warmth was a shock, so intense it was almost painful. Lyra was gentle, washing the grime from her hair and skin, tending to her split feet and blistered hands. She gave Ilara a simple, warm nightgown of soft wool. "Food will be here soon," Lyra said, guiding her to the bed. The mattress was so soft, Ilara felt like she was sinking into a cloud. "Eat, then sleep. You are safe here." Safe? The word felt foreign on her tongue. Lyra left, and moments later, a young man brought a tray. Ilara stared at it. It wasn't scraps. It was a bowl of thick, fragrant stew, a heel of dark bread, a mug of sweet, warm milk, and an apple. An entire, perfect apple. She hadn't seen one in years. She ate like a wolf, her hands shaking, scalding her mouth, not caring. She devoured every last drop, every crumb. Only when the tray was empty did she lean back, her stomach full for the first time in memory. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pulling her down into the mattress. She was in the Dark Alpha's fortress. He knew her name. He had wrapped her in his cloak. He had called her a guest. It made no sense. Her pack would be wondering where she was, or, more likely, they were glad she was gone. One less mouth to feed, one less curse to drain their luck. Her last thought as sleep claimed her was of Kalen's eyes, the color of ice, but they had looked at her, and she hadn't felt cold at all. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she was confused, disoriented by the softness of the bed, the warmth of the room. Then the memory of the night before crashed back into her. She sat up, clutching the blankets. Kalen's cloak was gone. Her muddy rags were gone. The door opened. Alara scrambled back against the headboard, her heart leaping into her throat. It was Kalen. He was even more intimidating in the light of day. He filled the doorway, his shoulders impossibly broad. He wore simple black leathers, and his dark hair was tied back, revealing the sharp, scarred lines of his face. He carried a tray in his hands. He stopped, seeing her terror. He didn't move closer. He simply placed the tray on a chest near the door. "Good morning," he said. His voice was the same low rumble, but it was quiet. Alara just stared, her knuckles white on the blankets. I brought you breakfast," he said. "Lyra said you need to eat small, frequent meals." She said nothing. Her mind was screaming. "Why are you being kind? What do you want?" He seemed to understand the silent questions. He leaned against the doorframe, a casual posture that seemed at odds with his formidable presence. It was a deliberate attempt to appear non-threatening. You are not a prisoner, Alara. I meant what I said." You knew my name," she finally managed, her voice a croak. He nodded. "I did." "How?" He paused, his gaze searching her face. "I have been aware of the Cinder Pack's struggles for some time. I have been watching, and I have been listening." Watching? A new, cold fear trickled down her spine. "Why?" "Your alpha, Silas," Kalen said, his voice hardening. "He is a poor leader. He starves his people. He hoards resources. And he makes bad deals." Ilara flinched at the mention of Silas. He says I am the cause, the curse." Kalen's expression darkened. "He lies," he said, the words flat and final. "You are not a curse, Ilara. You are something else." "I am an Omega," she whispered, the mark of her shame. "My wolf is broken. I haven't been able to shift since I was a child." "That, too, is a lie." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Your wolf is not broken," Kalen said, his eyes intense. "It is sleeping, buried, because Silas and those before him forced it into hiding. They poisoned you with their words, made you believe you were weak, because they feared what you would become." This was madness. He was talking nonsense. She was weak. She was worthless. She was the reason the hunts failed, the reason the river silted, the reason sickness took the elders. Silas had told her so, beaten it into her, scarred it onto her skin. "You don't believe me," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It doesn't matter. You will in time." He pushed off the doorframe. "Eat. Get your strength back. No one here will harm you." "Your beta, Malachi," she whispered. "He hates me." "Malachi is protective," Kalen said. "He sees a Cinder Pack stray, and he assumes you are a spy. He will learn, as you will. He turned to leave. "Wait!" she cried out, surprising herself. He paused, looking back. "Why?" she asked, desperation in her voice. "Why bring me here? Why me? What do you want from me?" Kalen was silent for a long moment. He walked back into the room, stopping at the foot of her bed. He was so close now. She could see the flecks of gray in his dark hair, the fine lines around his eyes. He looked older than she'd first thought, and tireder. He carried a great weight. "What do I want?" he repeated softly. He looked at her, his gaze so piercing it felt like he was seeing straight into her soul, past the fear and the scars, to the tiny, flickering ember she thought had died long ago. "I want you to be safe," he said. "I want to see you heal. And I want you to show me why your scent—" He took a quiet breath. "Your scent has been haunting my dreams for a year." Ilara's breath hitched. Her scent? She didn't have a mating scent. She was a broken omega. "Eat, Ilara," he said again, his voice gentle. He turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. Ilara was left in the silent room, her world fractured. The food sat on the tray, steam rising from it. Her scent. Had been dreaming of her scent. The monster of the woods, the dark alpha, dreamed of her. She spent the next few days in that room, a willing prisoner of its warmth and safety. Lyra visited often, bringing food, fresh clothes, and salves for her scars. The old healer would sit and talk, simple, gentle gossip about the Shadowfen pack. She spoke of Kalen with a fierce loyalty. "He is not what they say, you know," Lyra commented one afternoon as she checked the healing of Ilara's feet. "Dark, yes. Hard, yes. He has had to be. This land is not kind. But he is a good alpha. He provides, he protects, he is just." "He frightens me," Ilara admitted in a small voice. "He frightens everyone, child," Lyra chuckled. "That is part of his protection. But he has never, not once, raised a hand to someone weaker than himself. He has never harmed a pup or an elder. The only ones who fear Kalen's wrath are those who would harm his pack. Those who would harm his pack." Ilara thought of the way he had looked at her scars. The rage. On the fourth day, she felt strong enough to walk. The room felt small. She craved air. Hesitantly, she opened her door. The hall was empty. She crept out, her bare feet silent on the stone. She clutched the simple wool dress Lyra had given her, feeling terribly exposed. She found her way down to the great hall. It was midday, and the hall was bustling. People were mending gear, children were playing by the fire, a group of women were weaving on a large loom. As she entered, a hush fell. Every eye turned to her. Ilara froze, her instinct to flee, to hide, screaming at her. "Well, don't just stand there, girl," a gruff voice called out. An old warrior, missing one eye, was sitting by the fire, carving a piece of wood. "You're letting the cold in. Come by the fire. You're that omega the alpha brought in, aren't you? You look like a starved rabbit." Hesitantly, she moved forward. The conversation started up again, but they were quieter. She could feel the weight of their stares. She sat on a small stool near the hearth, as far from the one-eyed warrior as she could get, holding her hands out to the flames. "They say you're from the Cinder Pack," the warrior said, not looking up from his carving. "Place is a mess. Silas is a fool, letting his people starve while he lines his pockets." Ilara was shocked. "Lines his pockets? But we have nothing." The warrior snorted. "You have nothing. He has plenty. He trades furs for luxuries over the mountains. Rogues bring him silver. He keeps it all for himself and his chosen few." "No," Ilara whispered. "The blight, the sickness," Silas said. "Silas says a lot of things," a woman at the loom said, her voice sharp. He says that patch of land is cursed. Funny, it was fine until he started meeting his rogue friends there. Ilara felt dizzy. Everything she knew was a lie. Silas wasn't a victim of her curse. He was a monster. But why blame her? Because it's easy, the one-eyed warrior said, as if reading her mind. A weak Omega, no family to defend her, a silent wolf. You were the perfect scapegoat. Easier to blame you than to admit his own failings. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, and her breath caught. Malachi, the beta, was standing over her. His face was a thundercloud. "What are you doing down here, stray?" he growled. Ilara shrank back. I just wanted warmth." "You are a spy," he hissed, his voice low so only she could hear. "You are here to poison us, to bring Silas Vought into our home. The Alpha may be blind to it, but I am not." "No," she pleaded, shaking her head. "I'm not. I would never." "He brought you here, gave you the tower room, eats with you," Malachi sneered. "He's lost his mind. He's been bewitched by a cinderpack whore." The word struck her like a physical blow. Tears sprang to her eyes. "That is enough, Malachi." Kalen's voice was deathly quiet. He stood at the entrance to the hall, and he had heard every word. The entire hall went silent. Malachi froze, his face pale. Kalen walked slowly, deliberately, across the hall. He didn't stop until he was standing directly in front of his beta. He was taller than Malachi, broader. He looked down at his second-in-command, and his frozen lake eyes were burning. "She is under my protection," Kalen said, his voice a lethal softness. "She is my guest. You will treat her with respect. You will address her as Ilara, and you will never," his voice dropped to a growl that vibrated in Ilara's chest, "call her that name again. Do you understand me?" Malachi was trembling, his eyes wide. He was terrified of his Alpha. "Alpha, I only meant—" "Do you understand me?" Kalen repeated. "Yes, Alpha," Malachi choked out. "It will not happen again." "Good." Kalen didn't move. He just stared at Malachi, a long, heavy silence. Finally, he dismissed him with a curt nod. "Go. See to the northern patrols." Malachi fled. He didn't just walk away, he fled. Kalen turned to Ilara. The rage was gone from his face, replaced by that unreadable, intense focus. The entire hall was watching them. He held out his hand. "Come," he said. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely lift it. She placed it in his. His hand was huge, warm, and calloused. He gently but firmly pulled her to her feet. He didn't let go. He turned to the silent, watchful pack. "This is Ilara," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "She is not our enemy. She is a victim of Silas, as we all are. She is under my personal protection. Anyone who shows her disrespect answers to me." He tugged her hand gently. "Walk with me." He led her from the great hall, his hand still holding hers. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. It was like he had forgotten she wasn't a child. Or maybe, she thought, he knew exactly how fragile she was. He led her up a different set of stairs, to a part of the fortress she hadn't seen. He opened a door to a vast circular room. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with books and scrolls. A large fireplace dominated one wall, a warm fire already crackling. In the center was a large worn table covered in maps. "This is my study," he said, finally releasing her hand. The loss of warmth was immediate. Why did you do that?" she whispered, rubbing her hand. "Why defend me? He's your beta. They'll they'll hate me more. They will respect my command, Kalen said, and Malachi needed to be reminded of his place. He lets his fear speak for him. He walked over to the fire, poking it with an iron. He is not wrong to be suspicious, Ilara. Silas is a threat, a greater one than my pack knows. What do you mean? He turned from the fire, his face grim. The blight, the sickness in your pack lands, it's not a curse. It's poison. Silas has been allowing rogues to dump it in your river, in your soil, in exchange for silver and weapons. Ilara felt sick. Poison. But our people are dying, the pups. He doesn't care, Kalen said flatly. He believes he can take what he wants from others. And he has been. His raids on lone farms have gotten bolder. But now, the poison is spreading. It has crossed the river. It is beginning to taint my lands. That's why you were watching, she realized. You weren't trying to save me. You were hunting him. I was doing both, he said. He walked to the table, to one of the maps. I was tracking the poison's source, but I was also tracking you. Me? He looked up, his eyes locking on hers. I told you, your scent, it's different. It doesn't smell like the cinder pack. It doesn't smell like the poison or the rot. It smells, he hesitated, clean, like new growth clover, like moonlight on snow. I found it, faint near the border, and I followed it. He moved from behind the table, closing the distance between them. Ilara's heart hammered. She was alone with him, in his private study. He was so large. He stopped, just out of arm's reach. When I found you, he said, his voice low, you were on your knees, waiting for death. And you still smelled like hope. I didn't understand. I had my trackers searching for the source of this scent for months. They thought I was chasing a ghost. But it was you. It was always you. I don't understand, she stammered. I'm just an Omega. I'm nothing. You are not nothing, he growled, a flicker of that rage returning. You are the only thing that makes sense in this entire mess. Silas has been trying to break you, to smother you. Why? Why so much effort on one broken Omega? He said I was to be his mate, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. That's why I ran. The ceremony was last night. I ran. I'd rather be killed by you than touched by him. Kalen's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The air in the room crackled with his contained fury. He would not just mate you, he said, his voice thick. He would cage you. He would use you. Use me? For what? That, Kalen said, is what we need to find out. He took a step closer. He was so close now, she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He raised his hand, not fast, but slow, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. She was frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze. He gently touched her face, his rough fingers tracing the line of her jaw. You are not a curse, Ilara. I think you might be the cure. His words hung in the air, audacious and terrifying. A cure. She, who had only ever been a blight. It was too much. The emotion of the day, the confrontation with Malachi, Kalen's defense, his confessions, it overwhelmed her. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled over, tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. Kalen's expression softened. The hardness in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a raw vulnerability that shocked her more than his anger. He looked pained. "Ah, Ilara," he breathed. He used his thumbs to wipe her tears away, his touch clumsy and gentle. "Don't. I I am not good at this, at comfort. No one has ever been kind, she choked out, the admission torn from her. No one has ever defended me. Then they were all fools, he said, his voice rough. I will not be. He didn't pull her into a hug. He didn't soothe her with platitudes. He just stood there, his large, warm hands cupping her face, his presence a solid, unmoving wall against the world. He was offering her protection, his strength a shield. And in that moment, she didn't feel like a captive. She felt anchored. The peace was shattered by a frantic pounding on the study door. "Alpha! Alpha, Kaylin!" Kaylin's hands dropped from her face. The mask of the Alpha snapped back into place. "Enter," he barked. A young warrior burst in, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with panic. "Alpha, it's Malachi. He took a patrol to the old bridge. He said he was testing the border." Kaylin went rigid. The old bridge, that is Cinderpack territory. He's provoking an attack. "No, Alpha," the warrior panted. "It's worse." "He took her. The other one." Kaylin frowned. "Other one?" "The Cinderpack stray, Alpha. The Omega. Ilara." Kaylin's head whipped toward Ilara, who was standing beside him. His eyes were blank with confusion. He looked back at the warrior. "What are you talking about? Ilara is right here." The warrior stared at Ilara, then at his Alpha, his face ashen. Then who did Malachi take? A cold, dreadful understanding dawned on Ilara. My sister," she whispered. Kaylin's blood ran cold. "Sister?" "Leah," Ilara breathed, her hands flying to her mouth. She's not right. In the head. She's simple, sweet, but slow. Silas kept her hidden. He was ashamed of her. But she looks like me, from a distance. Smaller, weaker. Oh, gods. He thought she was me." Kaylin was already moving. He grabbed a heavy sword from the wall. "Silas," he snarled. "He didn't just let you run, Ilara. He let you go. He knew you'd come here. He was trading you." "Trading?" Ilara was numb with horror. "A trade," Kaylin said, his voice a venomous hiss. "He let his curse run to his enemy, to prove he had nothing to hide. A distraction. And while I was focused on you, he sent your sister. A decoy. But Malachi took the bait. And now he's walking her right into a trap." "He'll kill her," Ilara whispered, her legs giving out. "Silas, he'll kill Leah to start a war. He'll blame you. He'll blame me." Kaylin caught her. He hauled her to her feet. "He will not," he vowed, his face a mask of terrible resolve. He dragged her to the door. "Stay here. Lock this door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "No!" Ilara grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "You don't understand. She's my sister. She's all I have. I can't hide in here while he... Please, take me with you." "It's a war zone, Ilara. You are not a warrior." "I don't care. I know the land. I know the paths. He'll have rogues. You'll be outnumbered. I can help." He looked down at her, at the desperate, blazing fire in her eyes. This was not the broken Omega. This was a sister, a survivor. He saw the strength he'd known was there. He made his decision. "Fine," he growled, "but you do exactly as I say. You run when I tell you to run. You hide when I tell you to hide. This is not a request." He bellowed into the hall. "To arms! To the old bridge! Now!" The fortress exploded into action. Warriors poured from every room, grabbing weapons. Ilara ran beside Kaylin, her heart a cold stone of terror in her chest. "Leah, hold on, I'm coming." The rain had started again, a cold, miserable downpour that turned the world to gray. Kalen had shifted. He was an enormous black wolf, a creature of shadow and muscle, and Alara rode on his back, her hands fisted in his thick fur. His pack, a dozen of his best warriors, ran with them in their wolf forms. They moved through the trees like phantoms, covering the ground at a speed that stole Alara's breath. She could smell the river, the rot, the poison, but underneath it she could smell something else: blood and fear. Leah's fear. They burst through the trees onto the riverbank. The scene was chaos. The old, sagging rope bridge was just ahead. Malachi and his 3 warriors were backed against the river, surrounded, but not by Cinderpack wolves. These were rogues, mangy, scarred, their eyes glowing with a rabid light, and standing on the bridge, holding a knife to the throat of a small, whimpering girl, was Silas. "Silas!" Alara screamed, sliding from Kalen's back as he shifted, the air shimmering around him. Silas grinned, his teeth yellow. The girl, Leah, cried out, "Alara! Alara, help me!" "So, the little curse comes," Silas sneered, "and she brings the dark alpha with her. How cozy! Did you enjoy my gift, Kalen? A broken omega, just for you?" "Let the girl go, Silas." Kalen's voice was a low growl. His warriors fanned out, their swords drawn. "Oh, I don't think so," Silas laughed. "See, I have a new deal. You keep the cursed one. She's blighted my pack long enough. But I take this one, and I take your beta." He gestured to Malachi, who was bleeding from a deep gash in his arm. "Payment for trespassing." "No deal," Kalen said. "Wrong answer," Silas yelled, and he pressed the knife. Leah screamed. "Wait!" Alara cried. She stepped forward, her hands up. "Take me. Let her go. It's me you want. I'm the curse. Take me." Silas looked at her, his eyes glittering. "Yes, you are. You're the one who ruined everything. But Kalen seems to want you, which makes you valuable." "Alpha, don't!" Malachi choked out, clutching his arm. "It's a trap. He led us here. He wanted Alara." "He wanted her," Kalen corrected, his eyes fixed on Alara. A terrible, sickening realization bloomed in Alara's mind. The blight, the poison, the scent Kalen followed. It doesn't smell like the poison. It smells clean. Her, the scapegoat. "It's not me," Alara whispered, her voice shaking. "It's not. I'm not the curse." "Of course you are," Silas spat. "No." Alara's voice grew stronger. She looked at the blighted, gray earth at her feet. She looked at the sickness in the rogue's eyes. She looked at Leah, pale and terrified. "I'm not the curse. The poison, you brought it. But I was stopping it." Kalen's head snapped toward her. "Alara, what are you saying?" My whole life," Alara said, her mind racing. Pieces clicking into place. Every time I was near the river, the sickness, it seemed to lessen. Every time I cried over the dead earth, things would struggle to grow. Silas, he didn't keep me close to punish me. He kept me close to use me, to clean up his mess. "Shut up!" Silas shrieked, his composure cracking. "Shut your mouth, you lying." "I am a healer," Alara said, the word tasting strange and powerful. "My wolf isn't broken. It's healing. And you've been feeding off it. Off me." "That's why you starved me, beat me, to keep me weak, to keep me from knowing." "Kalen," she said, turning to him, her eyes shining with tears, but also with a fierce, new power. "He's afraid of me." Kalen looked at her, at the dawning light in her face, and he saw it, the truth, the power he had scented. It wasn't just a scent, it was life, "Lies!" Silas screamed. He shoved Leah forward, off the bridge. The girl tumbled into the mud. He lunged, not at Kaelin, but at Ilara. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you both!" He was fast, but Kaelin was faster. He met Silas' charge with a roar, not of a man, but of a beast. His claws half-shifted, tore through the air. But he wasn't attacking Silas. He was grabbing Ilara, spinning, putting his own body between her and the attack. Silas's knife, coated in something black and viscous, plunged deep into Kaelin's side. A terrible, echoing silence fell. The rain, the river, Kaelin's harsh gasp. He looked down at the hilt protruding from his ribs. He looked at Ilara, his eyes wide with shock. Then his legs buckled. He collapsed to his knees, pulling her down with him. "Kaelin!" she screamed. Silas laughed, a high, broken sound. "Poisoned," he hissed, backing away. "Wolfsbane and silver rot. He's dead. The Dark Alpha is dead. Kill them!" The rogues charged. Kaelin's warriors met them, a clash of steel and snarls. Malachi, his face a mask of white-hot fury, bellowed and threw himself at two rogues, his sword singing. But Ilara saw none of it. She was on her knees in the mud, cradling Kaelin. His blood, dark and thick, was pouring over her hands. His breathing was shallow. "No," she whispered. "No. You saved me. You can't." He touched her face, his hand trembling. "Ilara," he coughed, a spray of blood dotting her cheek. "You are safe. I don't want to be safe," she sobbed. "I want you." A rage, cold and pure and silver, unlike anything she had ever known, flooded her. It was not the red rage of an alpha. It was the cold, unyielding fury of the moon. It was the anger of life itself against the rot. "You are not dying," she snarled. She pressed her hands to his wound. The pain was immediate. The silver in the poison seared her skin, a white-hot agony that should have made her pull away, but she didn't. She pushed. She pushed past the pain, past the fear, past the broken omega she had been. She called on the wolf she thought was dead. She called on the power she never knew she had. A light, pale and silver white, exploded from her hands. It wasn't hot. It was cool, like moonlight. It sank into Kaelin's wound, into his body. The black, viscous poison sizzled, turning to steam, being forced back out of the wound. The flesh beneath her palms knitted together, the torn muscle weaving, the skin sealing. The light flared brighter and brighter until it was a blinding column that shot into the storm-dark sky. Every single person, rogue, warrior, Silas, Leah, stopped. They stared, blinded as the light pulsed. Ilara was screaming, but it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a roar of pure, untamed power. The ground around her, the blighted, dead earth, erupted. New grass, green and lush, sprang from the mud. The very air smelled clean, like pine and clover and snow. The light vanished. Ilara was left panting, her hand still on Kaelin's side. The wound was gone. Not just healed, it was gone, as if it had never been. Kaelin's eyes flew open. He gasped, a deep, shuddering breath of clean air. He looked at his side. He looked at Ilara. Her hands were smoking, burned from the silver, but she was staring at him, her eyes glowing with a faint, silvery light. He reached up, his hand steady, and touched her face. "My moon," he breathed. She's a witch," one of the rogues stammered, backing away. "A moon touched." The word hung in the air. A legend, a myth,
a healer of the land itself.
Silas' face was white with terror. He had not been caging an Omega, he had been caging a force of nature, and he had just tried to kill her mate. Healer, Leah whispered, crawling toward Alara. You fixed my arm when I broke it. You held it, and it was warm. Alara looked at her sister, the memory surfacing. A fall from a tree, a bone at a sickening angle. She had held Leah, crying, pouring all her love and desperate hope into her, and the next day the arm was only bruised. They had hidden it, terrified Silas would see. "Run," Kalen said, his voice quiet. He was on his feet, helping Alara up. He stood beside her, not as a wounded alpha, but as something new, a consort. The rogues didn't need to be told twice. They turned and fled, disappearing into the woods, terrified of the light they had seen. Only Silas was left. He was shaking, his knife in the mud. He looked at Kalen, strong and whole. He looked at Alara, her eyes glowing. He looked at Malachi and the Shadowfen warriors who were staring at Alara with undisguised awe. "Please," Silas whimpered, falling to his knees. "Please, I didn't know." Alara walked toward him. The mud did not seem to stick to her feet. She stopped, looking down at the alpha who had tormented her for a decade. He was just a small, pathetic man. "You poisoned the land," she said, her voice echoing, as if two voices spoke at once, her own and a much older, stronger one. "You starved your people. You hurt my family." She looked at Kalen. He stood with her, a silent shadow of support. She looked at Leah, who was smiling, her face full of simple, pure joy. She looked back at Silas. "You are no alpha," she said. She didn't need to shout. The words were a judgment. She turned her back on him. "Malachi," Kalen said, his voice flat. "Alpha." Malachi stepped forward, his face grim. He looked at Alara, and the resentment was gone, replaced by a fierce, humbled loyalty. He bowed his head to her. "Luna," he whispered. Then he looked at Kalen. "What are your orders?" "Bind him," Kalen said. "Take him back to the fortress. His pack will decide his fate." As Malachi and his men seized Silas, who was weeping pathetic, terrified tears, Alara stumbled. The power, having saved Kalen, receded, leaving her exhausted, her hands screaming in pain. Kalen caught her. He swung her up into his arms as easily as he had the first night. "I have you," he murmured. "My hands," she whispered, her head falling against his chest. "Lyra will see to them," he said. He looked at Leah. The girl was watching them, her eyes wide. "Leah," Kalen said, his voice gentle, "we are taking your sister home. You are welcome to come with us. You will be safe." Leah nodded, scrambling to her feet. She ran to Kalen's side, grabbing a handful of his tunic, her eyes fixed on Alara. Kalen turned and began the walk back to the fortress, his pack forming a protective escort around him, his beta following with their prisoner. Alara, safe in his arms, finally let go. She slept. When she woke, she was back in the tower room. Her hands were bandaged in cool, soothing salve. Lyra was dozing in a chair by the fire. Leah was asleep on a pallet at the foot of her bed, snoring softly. Alara sat up. Kalen was there. He was standing by the window, looking out at the dawn. He turned as she moved, and his face, the harsh lines were gone, replaced by a softness she had never seen. You're all right," she whispered. "I am," he said. He walked to her bed, sitting on the edge. He carefully took her bandaged hands in his. "The silver, it burned you. Because of me." "It doesn't matter," she said. "You're alive." "You healed me," he said.
his voice full of wonder. "You healed the land. A moon touched. My pack, they are already calling you Luna." Ilara flushed. "Uh, I, I don't know what to do. I don't know how." "You will learn," he said. "I will help you. We, we will learn together." He brought her bandaged hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a reverence that made her tremble. My wolf, it knew. From the first moment, it recognized its moon. "Uh, I, I was so scared of you," she admitted. "I know," he said, a sad smile touching his lips. "The dark alpha. I have cultivated that fear. It has kept my people safe. But I never wanted you to be afraid of me." "I'm not," she said, and she realized it was true. Not anymore. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Ilara," he whispered, just as he had that first night. But this time, it was not a mystery. It was not a question. It was a claim. Weeks passed. The Cinder Pack, leaderless and starving, were brought to the fortress. When they saw Ilara, whole and strong, and Leah, fed and safe, they fell to their knees. They had lived under Silas's terror for so long, they didn't know what to do with kindness. Silas was tried, and, by the joint laws of the packs, exiled, sent into the blighted lands he himself had created. Ilara, with Lyra's help, began to learn about her power. It was slow. It was tied to the land, to the moon, to her own emotions. She couldn't perform miracles on command, but with Kaelin at her side, she found a new strength. She learned to heal. She started with the river, walking its banks, her touch coaxing life back into the poisoned water. Malachi became her most devoted guard. He followed her everywhere, his loyalty absolute, his shame at his initial treatment of her a driving force. He and Leah formed an unlikely friendship, his gruffness softened by her simple, trusting nature. The fortress was no longer just Kaelin's. It was theirs. The great hall was full, the two packs merging, tentatively at first, then with growing hope. The Dark Alpha was still hard, still a formidable leader, but his people saw the way he looked at his Luna. They saw his hand always finding hers, his quiet smile when she laughed. One evening, Ilara stood on the balcony of the study, looking out over the lands. The air was clean. A faint, greenish tinge was returning to the distant woods. It would take years, generations to fully heal, but it had begun. She wore one of Kaelin's warm tunics, and his cloak was wrapped around her shoulders. It was a familiar comfort now, not a captive shroud. She heard him come up behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his solid, warm chest. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "What are you thinking about, my moon?" he rumbled. "That first night," she whispered, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "In the woods. I was so terrified. I expected so much pain." "And, instead," he prompted, his lips brushing her temple. She smiled, turning in his arms to face him. She cupped his scarred, beautiful face with her bandaged hands. "Instead," she said, "you wrapped your cloak around me. You gave me your warmth. You gave me a home." "You," he said, his voice thick, "gave me a reason. You are my pack, Ilara. You are my life." He bent his head, and his mouth captured hers. The kiss was not the brutal claiming of an alpha, but the deep, devoted promise of a mate. It was a kiss of healing, of hope, and of a love found in the deepest shadows. He was her dark alpha, and she was his moon. And together, they were bringing the dawn.